So if you've been following us on Instagram, you know that we were out of town last week, and that is why this video is a day late. So I filmed most of it before we went out of town, but then I had to wait to edit it until I came home. Our family went with some of the other parents from our Christian school, and we supported our students as they competed at regional student convention in drama and music and sports and arts and crafts. It was a beautiful and fun week supporting our students and celebrating them as they walked away with medals and awards for all their hard work. Good morning. In today's video, I will be showing you how we make butter in the blender and also how to make ice cream. So we're actually preparing to go out of town, and before we go out of town, I have a whole lot of dairy that needs to be taken care of because if I don't take care of it and I come home, it'll all have to probably go to the pigs because it'll be old milk. So number one, I don't have time to make a whole lot of cheese before we leave. So the next most valuable thing that I could do with the milk is to skim all the cream and make butter. So that is what we're doing. And hopefully I'll have enough footage that when we're out of town, I can edit this film and put it all together so that I can still publish it on Saturday. But before we leave today, I am processing, I have almost 3 gallons of cream that I have skimmed, and I'm turning that all into butter. I called a neighbor to come get the freshest milk, and the rest of it I'm just gonna toss to the pigs, and then we'll start fresh when we come home. So I have a Vitamix blender, and I'm already partially done with making the butter. I've got some ready to press, I've got some already pressed, I've got some cream still left to go, and I've got this draining, and then I've got this that's at the whipped cream stage. So I know in a previous video I showed the kids churning butter by hand. But sometimes we fall behind because we have so many other things going on here on the homestead that we don't have time to churn butter every day, and that's what happens, and then it piles up. So that's when I use my Vitamix. I don't prefer to do it this way, but this is definitely the fastest way. It's also a whole lot messier, and because the Vitamix has blades instead of churns, the butter is in tiny little pieces because it's all cut apart, and there's a lot more buttermilk left in the butter. So there's a lot more pressing of the butter to work the buttermilk out. There's a lot of that I have to do when I make the butter in the blender. So when I first pour the cream into the blender, I start it on a pretty high setting, and then I just let it churn until it gets to the whipped cream stage, and that's where my plunger comes in. So once it's at the whipped cream stage, the plunger is used to help the cream keep churning. And I just kind of move the plunger around in there to keep that whipped cream from just setting up and not churning anymore. As soon as I see the butter start to separate into little pieces, I turn my blender down on low. And here you can see that I've got little chunks of butter, and then I just run it a little bit longer to get all that buttermilk separated from the butter. And then I pour it into my strainer, and I let all the buttermilk run down into the pitcher while the strainer catches all the little pieces of butter. And then I just start over and pour some more cream into my blender. I always shake up my jars of cream because the thicker, heavier cream tends to come to the top, and that actually makes butter faster than the thinner cream at the bottom. But I like to mix it all together and churn heavy cream with lighter cream. So then while my next batch of cream is churning, I'll just work on this one, and I just kind of fold it, keep folding it and folding it until it has released all the buttermilk. So one of the last things I do to help get all the buttermilk out of the butter is I rinse it under cold water. So once I feel like I've massaged all the buttermilk out that I can, then I rinse it and massage it while I'm rinsing it. If too much buttermilk stays in the buttermilk will ferment or go sour, and it'll give your butter a sour taste. This has happened to us. It's not a huge deal. If we have butter that tastes sour, we just mark it for baking instead of using fresh. And then we use it all up in our baking. I know that I can get wooden tools to help me work the buttermilk out of the butter, but using my hands is the way that my mom and my grandma taught me, and it's still my go-to method for working with butter because that's the way I was taught. If the butter is sticking to your hands, rinse your hands with cold water. I have naturally cold hands, so the butter doesn't usually get too soft in my hands. So once I'm satisfied that I've worked all the buttermilk out and rinsed it all out, then I add salt to the butter. I use mineral salt, and I add about half a teaspoon of salt per pound of butter. I think I have close to 4 pounds of butter in this bowl, so I added 2 teaspoons of salt. And then I just work that salt in. After we've worked the salt in, we package it in 1 pound packages, and then we store it in the freezer. Okay, so we're gonna make some ice cream, and this is milk. And hang on, now I forgot which is milk and which is cream. Okay, so this is milk. I need 1 cup of milk. And then I need 3 cups of fresh cream. So I'm gonna bring this all the way up to 4 cups. Next, I'm gonna add 3/4 a cup of granulated sugar. And then you want the real good vanilla, and we need a whole tablespoon of vanilla. And then what we need next is egg yolks. So I've got 4 eggs, and I want only the yolks. So we're just gonna save the whites, and I'll use those I'll just add them to our scrambled eggs for breakfast. Or if I'm real ambitious, I'll make some angel food cake. So the one thing that my mama taught me is whenever something gets vanilla, it also needs salt, because salt brings out vanilla's flavor. So whenever I'm making anything that calls for vanilla and doesn't call for salt, I always add salt. So in my ice cream recipe, you need 1/4 a teaspoon of salt, just to balance out that vanilla flavor and to really make it burst. Also, when you're trying to cut back on sugar in something, Salt and vanilla will go a long ways towards pleasing your taste buds without excessive sugar. So now we've got all our ingredients in for the ice cream, and we're just gonna whip this up. And it's real important to get all the sugar dissolved, because that will help the ice cream set if the sugar's all dissolved. And the raw eggs in this ice cream, this is the way we make our eggnog, very similar to this, and we aren't afraid to use raw eggs in our diet, especially the raw eggs that come from the farm here. But if I was using store-bought eggs, I would probably look for an ice cream recipe where this mixture gets heated and cooked together and then cooled. And I used to make some ice cream like that until I found recipes where you don't have to cook your raw eggs. And that fits my cooking style a whole lot better, because if I want to make ice cream, I often am not thinking about ice cream until an hour before dinner. And then I hurry up, want to make ice cream, then I don't have time to cook it and cool it before I churn it. So now we're gonna go put this in our ice cream machine. And this mix will work in any ice cream machine. We have a new ice cream machine that Elvin got me for Christmas, and it has taken my ice cream making game up a notch. Not because the machine works so much better than the old-fashioned machine, but because it's easier, which means I'm making ice cream more often. So I've gotten more practice, and I've gotten to really get comfortable with my recipe. And I'm finally to the point where I'm so comfortable with my recipe that I'm sharing it with you. And in the printable recipe in the description, I will have some variations that we make. Today we're just making vanilla, but I'll have the chocolate and the coffee version, and how to add fresh fruit to it as well. Okay, so this is the ice cream maker we have, and I will link that for you in the description. And I usually run it out here in the laundry room because our house is noisy enough without listening to this ice cream churn for the next 45 minutes. So I've got my little bucket, and I'm just gonna set it in here. And then we're gonna put the lid on. And we're gonna hit start. And I don't need any ice, and I didn't have to put anything in the freezer. This thing has its own compressor, and it's just gonna churn this while I make dinner, and then we'll be all set. So it's been about 40 minutes, and it definitely looks like we've got some ice cream. And we're just gonna let this churn until it can't go anymore, and then we'll call it done. So we've got 13 minutes left, and I think we're gonna call it good. So when the ice cream is done, you can either serve it immediately or put it in the freezer until you're ready to serve. But today we are making ice cream pies, and I've made a Rice Krispie crust. And I'm just gonna fill the pies with ice cream, and then when we serve it, we can top it with some whipped cream and maybe drizzle some caramel or chocolate sauce over it.